doubts. Welcome, everybody. My name is Rod Brown, and this is the 17th, believe it or not, the 17th virtual panel we've had over the last few months since lockdown, featuring the leaders and influencers in global accounting networks, alliances, and associations. And we've had some great discussions in the past. We've had a very esteemed and influential panel today that have their fingers in a lot of pies. They cover a lot of countries and disciplines, and I'm going to get them to introduce themselves in just a moment. And we're going to ask them a few questions about the accounting profession and how it is coping with these very crazy times that we find ourselves in. So, Michael, I'm going to come to you first because you're the only one here that is back for a second time. So you must have done something right the first time. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Rob. A pleasure to be here. Michael Rhys von Filski, Global CEO of GGI, which is a multidisciplinary association of independent firms. We have law firms and accounting firms and consulting firms in our membership, more than 600 members, roughly 30,000 full-time equivalents, and a combined fee income in excess of $5.6 billion.
So just a small outfit then, Michael.
Well, so you say.
So you say. Well, welcome. John Capper, we go back a long way, you and I. We're both here in the UK. Lovely to have you with us. Please give us a little introduction.
Yes, thank you, Rob. My name is John Kaplan, and I help to run an organisation that's known as AEGEAN. That's the European Group of International Accounting Networks and Associations. We're based in Brussels, and it's a representative office for the mid-tier of the accountancy profession with regard to the European institutions, principally the European Commission and the European Parliament. We've got 17 members, of which Michael is the CEO of one of them, and we work with the mid-tier, so roughly from number 8 in the world to number 30 in the world. The global league table is about where we'd be. In terms of total size, if you did aggregate all those members together, it would be over $30 billion US. But we just do a tiny role, which is to represent them at a European level, and obviously they do all the hard work themselves.
Indeed. Well, great to have you with us. Rhys Maddox, we've had a few chats on the phone. It is great to meet you in person, and welcome. Please give us a little introduction.
Yes, very good to be here indeed. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. I know so many of the faces around the table today. Rhys Maddox, CEO of UHY International. We are a network of accounting, audit and tax firms. We've got about 150 firms across our network, across 101 countries, as we've recently noted. And our global fee income is just shy of 600 million, 581 million. So there's a lot of interesting aspects, I think, that are happening globally that are impacting across all our networks and associations. And I think it should be a good conversation today.
Great. Well, it's lovely to have you with us, Rhys. And Olivier, welcome to this esteemed group of accounting influencers. It's thrilling to have you with us too. Please give us a little introduction.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm very impressed to join this group today, I must say. So my name is Olivier. I'm the chief executive of the umbrella organization for the profession in Europe, Accountancy Europe. We're basically grouping the professional institutes in 35 countries around Europe. So obviously bigger than the EU just, bringing together 51 professional institutes and with members active in basically all walks of life of a profession. So accountancy firms of all sizes, of course, but also professional accountants in business and professional accountants in the public sector. As everybody has started competing on numbers, I will add that if we add all the members of all our members, we're basically representing about 1 million professional in Europe. But we have a very small budget to do that, around 4 million euros. And I think we're doing the best we can with that to represent the profession with the European institutions, of course, but also all the international regulatory stakeholders and standard setters.
Well, thank you so much. And this is not about size, I hasten to add. We are all a force for good, and we are all doing our best to help the professionals that we look after. So thank you, everybody. Those are great introductions. And we're all old enough, I believe, to think back to 2008-9. There was a global recession then. Times were tough. Professional firms were laying off people and going down to 2-3 day weeks, and the work dried up. And we said, how will we cope with anything like this again? But we find ourselves again in a global crisis, and we've not known anything like this. So I want to open up with a question. And Rhys, I'll start with you on this one, if I may. What has this taught us about how accounting firms are equipped to deal with crisis like this? Have they learned lessons from last time? Have they showed up well? How do you feel they've coped?
Yes, I'll tell you what's been very interesting is to see how the different firms, different sizes, different economies have reacted to this pandemic for the current situation we're in. And as we view the global, a possible global, and everything's looking as though it probably will do, global downturn and recession, how do people view that? What do they look for? And I've been struck by the amount of upbeat discussions that have been going on around taking advantage of the opportunities that might arise from a difficult situation. It's a very easy thing to say. It's much more difficult to really, I think, encapsulate what that really means. But when it comes to some of the more entrepreneurial way of thinking, some of the more entrepreneurial firms out there, I've seen new services being developed slightly. I've seen new engagement with clients. So that's been quite interesting in itself. What I would say is, this is, I think, the mentality of approach to surviving through these situations is slightly different from previous years. In previous years, it was almost that it was something that was happening to my economy, and how am I going to deal with that? Now there's a general awareness, a lot stronger awareness, that this is affecting everybody. And this is affecting globally all the countries. And when you speak to other firms on Zoom and other media, everyone's in the same situation. Everyone is experiencing the same lockdown issues, or certainly have across the world at various different points. So there's a much more a feeling of we're in this together, which I don't think was necessarily as strong previously.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And Michael, you cut across the legal and the accounting side of things. Professional services generally, how do you feel they're coping with what's happening right now?
Well, I would dare to say that they're coping quite well. I don't think that we're all in exactly the same situation. I mean, there are these differences. We came out of a lockdown in Switzerland, for instance, and you can go to restaurants, you can go to a hairdresser, you can go to a supermarket, you have to wear a mask if you use public transport. But we're pretty much out of the first wave, and we're out of the lockdown, unlike many other countries. And that is creating certain differences. But I don't think we're going to go back to the old normal. And I think we're left with not much choice. It's either you adapt or you're out of business. And both law firms and accounting firms all over the globe are doing, I think, a very good job.
Mm-hmm. Olivier, when you look at accountancy as a profession, they've not changed very much over the years. We still have balance sheets and the way we did it 100 years ago. So how do you see accounting professionals and firms changing and adapting to things like what's happening right now?
Well, Rob, this is a debate, right? So you probably want me to disagree a little bit.
Go ahead. Feel free.
Indeed, I think the balance sheet in the textbook has not changed much, but the business model of clients have changed a lot. The debates we have around, what gets on the balance sheet have changed. in 1492, I think, when we started with double entry accounting, nobody was talking about integrated reporting. Nobody was talking about non-financial information. Nobody was talking about valuing intangibles. I think, on the contrary, the profession has gone through radical change along these years, always, softly, silently adapting, but adapting. And it is very interesting to hear so many people continue having this image of the conservative bean counter, while, I've been leading accounts Europe now for almost 15 years. I'm still due to meet, the bean counter with gray hair, gray suit, and a conservative mindset. I think this is a myth. I'm sorry. And we should be proud and demonstrate that it is a myth. So, no, we've been surrounded by change, and we've always embraced change.
Yeah, and John, Olivier defends the accounting almost entrepreneurial mindset, but we don't necessarily associate accountants with agility and the ability to adapt. But we're seeing that now, aren't we, surely, in how they're coping with all of this?
Yes, I mean, that was my feeling, really. We've got potentially a deeper recession than we had as a result of the crash in 2008, 2009. I think the accounting profession found itself in a difficult position after that, because there was a lot of questions asked about auditors and where they'd been in the times with particularly the bank audits. Whereas now, and there were questions about the relevance and the trust in the profession and so on, but all of a sudden this pandemic has meant that people have turned to the profession, businesses have turned to the profession and found them very capable of giving advice, of supporting, of understanding changes in regulations, changes in government support in every different country, and helping their business clients in that way. That's not necessarily something Aegean's been involved with their members in any way, but I am conscious that every single network and association's been working with their own membership to sort of compare notes, to bring the positive of what was happening in some countries to other countries and other firms, and to share best practice. I know, Olivier obviously is the umbrella of all the professional institutes, but the professional institutes have been doing a huge amount of work. When you hear that in the UK, for example, the ICAW coronavirus support pages were getting more hits than the government pages in people searching for information about furlough schemes in the UK, with 500,000 people on the website at any one time. Now that's completely unknown for accountants. Accountants aren't used to having so many people wanting their help, wanting their advice. And I think generally accountants, we might not have thought this in advance, but we're able to get people working from home straight away. The technology worked. Fortunately, cloud accounting probably had come in far enough for accountants to be able to work with their clients remotely. And I never thought I'd see the time when an audit would be done remotely, but audits have been done remotely as well. So yeah, I think it's adapted very, very well. Yeah. Whether it's enough is another matter, but I think it has adapted well.
True. And Michael, we have a European feel around the table. No one's talking about Brexit anymore for some reason. There are different things on the agenda. So let's talk about some of the choices that either you have made as GGI and an organization to adapt to this, or some of the choices you've seen your member firms make in their response to COVID-19.
Well, obviously, physical meetings are not going to happen probably for the entire year.
Sure.
That goes without saying, and even our last hope that a German-speaking regional meeting would materialize is very much in jeopardy. So I think all organizations moved to Zoom meetings and virtual meetings, and I think all the firms did. And we saw two results. The first one was that it was probably the fastest compulsory digitalization in the history of mankind, because people had to work from home literally overnight. And it works with all the deficiencies and difficulties and so on. And the second thing is that we noticed that to bridge the gap of not having physical meetings, conferences, and so on, that Zoom is the flavor of the year 2020, and that it works fairly well with of course, excessive Zoom that happens too when you have a call with two persons involved. A good old phone still works. You don't have to schedule a Zoom meeting just for two people to be communicating. But we, along all associations and networks, this was what happened. And I think it was very good. I think it was very helpful. Members managed to stay in touch and stay in contact. There was a tremendous sign of solidarity, of wanting to understand how everybody was doing. And still there is a lot of business taking place and with this new way of doing business. And I think we all did the best we could do.
Rhys, I saw you nodding there, and Michael was reflecting the opportunities and the positivity that you said earlier. So have you got any examples of how you've responded as an international organization, or what you've seen some of your firms doing to cope with what's going on?
It's Michael's absolutely right. I think his comment earlier on, adapt and change or suffer, and I think is spot on. And I think I was very pleased to see the speed at which firms, again, overnight, as Michael said, overnight adapted to a new way of working and a new way of engaging clients, a new way of engaging their fellow members in the network. Zoom did take on an immediate importance, which was a bit strange, really, because I'm not sure necessarily it was the mode of communication so frequently used beforehand. But what I've seen is a very much a willingness to engage much more readily and quickly with as one network. Trying to get everyone to pull together in the same direction is sometimes a challenge, because everyone has different priorities when we're dealing with clients, and we must look after our clients. And absolutely, as a network, I've seen a very strong pull to supporting each other, and that recognition that we can support each other. We've run a series of surviving COVID-19 type of calls in different regions, really just to air the opportunities that are coming up with dealing with clients, what sort of things are clients looking for during this period, but also to help recognize that not everyone is in the same position. As Michael also said, some of the larger firms with more staff, more offices, more resources are able to quickly adapt. Some of the smaller firms overnight are having to utilize new skills that they haven't necessarily come across. And but I think there's been a very good and strong support for that across all our countries.
Yeah. John, how important is it that networks and associations belong to something bigger than themselves? Because it's not a time to be isolated, is it? They've got to make smart choices. They've got to dip into Aegean and the accounts of Europe, and they've got to have that oversight and that support, that advice to get through this, haven't they?
Well, I guess they have. I mean, in particular, they would have turned to most firms would have turned to the professional institutes in their own country rather than at a European level. But even in the best of times, most of my members didn't have much resources deployed to monitor what was happening in Europe. Some of the larger ones, Michael himself is registered with the European Parliament to take part as a lobbyist and an influencer, just like we are. But most of the members aren't, and so we provide that small element of, and of course, Europe is also trying to respond at a European level with the finance, with harmonising what countries are doing. And it will affect the agenda of the European Commission over this 5-year term. It's had a slow start because they didn't really get going before this hit everything, and they've got their own big agenda items: the Green Deal, digital and competition, and sort of just generally the EU economy, partly in the wake of the Brexit word that you said we hadn't used yet, but also in the fact that we're at the start of a 7-year period for negotiating the European budget as well. So we keep an eye on those things. Having said that, I think that there's sufficient in most of the networks and associations for them to be very busy looking after that. So I've tried to minimize the hassle that I've brought to any of our members. Yes, we've done some of the stuff, but not and Michael's recently taken part in our first ever Zoom members assembly 2 weeks ago, and it was a great success. I've got to say, more people participated than would have participated if it had been a physical meeting. And generally the technology worked for 2 days. It didn't break down. And we all adapt. We all, stay flexible, don't we? On my machine, I was running the whole conference. The audio crashed the night before. Fortunately, I got good professionals to support me, so I got it going that morning, and we didn't have any issues during the assembly. But that's what it's about. It's about getting the right advice, having the right support, and to an extent talking to each other. So yes, we're planning now to have the next members assembly in the autumn virtually as well. Yeah. Just it saves people travelling, and that makes their life one little bit easier.
Of course. And Olivier, the theme very strongly here is collaboration. This is a time for talking to one another, for supporting one another. And what are your thoughts on the choices you're having to make in the way you're supporting your associations and institutes?
Well, maybe reacting also to what has been said, I think we are indeed all in this together. And you may want to take a look at the Accountancy Europe webpage that is dedicated to COVID, where all our members institutes are actually sharing the work that they do, and everything is being pulled together. So it's actually very impressive to see the mass of advice and effort that has been put into this. Really impressive. I just like to make a couple of comments, because I think we need to be very careful. We have been through a quite deep recession, and it's great that we remain very optimistic. Not recession, disruption actually. And it's great that we remain optimistic, and that we praise ourselves on all the things that have been going actually surprisingly well, including technology, I agree. But I think there are a number of lessons that we need to learn from that. And I agree with everybody that it's been very impressive to see how quickly we've been adapting to talking to each other and having virtual panels like that. Now, the first time I personally started working remotely and online was 25 years ago. And I can tell you at that time, the amount of reluctance and skepticism that this was, facing, and people at that time denying the fact that the internet would actually change our lives. It has, but the learning point here is that we had the technology, we had the knowledge. What we didn't have is the mindset and the constraint. Yeah. Now that we have the constraint, we had the mindset. And I think there is a lesson here to learn on how, in reality, reluctant, to change we have been, and how we need to be forced at times. So let's draw the lessons from that. And I think another lesson that we need to draw is that we're all talking about, as everybody else actually is, we're all talking about the recession ahead of us. Well, I would question that, because if we think in terms of recession, it almost automatically means that we have the expectation of going back to business as usual. And to my view, this is not what is going to happen. What we're going to face now is not a recession, it's a change of era. And if we continue seeing the climate and biodiversity crisis evolve as they do, if we listen to the warnings of science, there will very soon be a time where we are going to really regret recessions and pandemics, because it's going to be a lot worse, okay? So that again is, I think, a source of lessons that we need to learn. And when we look at our clients, I think a lot of our clients were not risk ready. And the information was there. It's just like the technology that was there and that enabled us to move online immediately. Scientific warnings on the development of coronavirus were there. The World Economic Forum warned everybody in their annual risk assessment. What did we do? What did government do? Nothing, okay? So we've been lucky, but we need to learn these lessons, that there are a number of warnings out there that we now need to take into account, and we need to get much better at assessing and managing what I would call our known unknowns, the things that, the inconvenient truths that we don't want to see. But let's forget the word recession. We're changing era, and this is what we have to build together, a new era.
That's fascinating, Olivier. And I'm going to ask you to finish very soon, gentlemen, with your thoughts on what's coming up for the next year or two. But for now, let's just focus on some of the things Olivier was saying there. There is room for improvement. There are ways that accounting professional firms are hurting right now. There's things they've got wrong, whether that be in how they've handled their marketing or their communications, or handled clients, or handled things internally with their culture. So let's just focus on this for a moment. And John, I'll start with you. From the accounting firms that you've seen, or even if you want to relate it to the accounting networks, what have they got wrong and what do they need to improve on?
I think, Rob, that I won't answer that for Aegean, because, of course, the Aegean members are fantastic. And
they've got everything right, John. I totally understand. Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know the detail at that level of the individual firms and then their support for the clients, Rob. But I'll answer it in terms of what I see differences between different accountants, because there are different accountants. We've been optimistic. We're talking about the great accountants who have changed.
Well, you're an accountant yourself, John, aren't you? So
yeah,
you know.
And of course, I'm one of the great ones. But there's some that haven't changed at all. And there's some that are still too far behind in terms of the reporting to the clients. They are still very traditional. They still rely on doing things very traditionally. They will have a massive job to cope, even to cope with clients as they were phoning them up saying, what do I do? How do I do it? Because they were so overwhelmed anyway themselves. So, let's not pretend there aren't those firms out there. There are. Probably those firms don't tend to join networks and associations because there's a certain amount of checking that goes on to see whether somebody's suitable to join the network. You don't want a bad firm as part of a network or an association, because when clients are referred to them from other countries, then they wouldn't get looked after properly, and that's not a good idea. But I work at a local level with members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and there's a huge variety. There's a huge variety in mindset that Olivier talked about, where some people are optimists, some people are pessimists. My own personal view is that accountants should do a lot more advisory work and not only focus on the compliance work. So that for me is what all accountants should do more of, and we should be more real time, so clients want things now. They don't want something from the calendar year 2019 at this point in time.
And Rhys, John makes an excellent point. Accounting firms haven't always got things right. They've been complacent. They've got an elegant business model with recurring income. It's been easy in some ways, but we know there's downward pressure on compliance fees. We know that advisory must be more on the conversational framework right now. Obviously, all of your UHY international firms have done everything perfectly, but where you do see improvements that need to be made, what kind of things should they be working on?
I think, I think it's one of these things that I don't think it's all wrong at all. I think there are areas where I wouldn't say it was necessarily wrong, but I think there's an area I think there are issues around a traditional approach to managing a client, which John was just mentioning, which I think goes out the window when you are having to engage in different ways. I think learning to understand that client needs are different, that trusted advisor approach, which really acts as an all-encompassing support for a client rather than necessarily by a single service line, I think is particularly important. I think it's important to appreciate that really we're dealing with the needs of a business rather than necessarily a service line delivery. And I've seen a lot of that change, and I think, and maybe I've seen it more articulated rather than perhaps it was there often anyway. But I think this development of moving away from a single line of services for a client, but more to that road of what is it? How can we support you, even if you don't need our direct service now? How can we support you? And I think that's been crucial to a lot of the maintaining client links, maintaining the development opportunities with the client and keeping them close.
Yeah, we have learned a lot about client needs. You're absolutely right. Olivier, can I come to you? And as you look at the profession overall, what changes do you feel they need to make? What areas of improvement to serve clients better ultimately? Because that's what this is about, as Rhys was saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, maybe I would like to make 4 points in this respect. I think.
Are you going to be controversial again? Because feel free
No,
to.
never. I try to refrain as much as I can, at least, but I know I never succeed, but I try. No, seriously, I think we really need to get better at assessing the unknowns, okay? Assessing the risk that are not, right under our nose. We need to help clients plan for the unexpected. And I think we're going to see more and more disruptions and unexpected risk. We need, therefore, to help clients build more resilient business models, and not only clients' business models, but I would even dare to say the planet's business model. We're all in this together. If we don't change our collective business model, we will collectively fail. Mm-hmm. So to achieve that, and that's my second point, I think we need to also, we're a people's business. I mean, even if I can't shake hands with you today, we're still a people business, and we need to get better at managing people online. We need to, if we want to get better with these unknown risks, we need to diversify our resources. We need to get people who know different things, but also who think differently. And to be able to do all this online, we have to reflect on our infrastructure and also invest in infrastructure, because that is the enabler, as we've seen. And finally, I think the profession has a fantastic role to play in informing policymakers. Policymakers sometimes need this feedback from people like accountants who are on the ground. And again, by providing this feedback, we're working in the public interest to make sure that we change the business model of the planet and that we can collectively continue surviving.
Yeah, they're excellent points. And I'm just reminded of the phrase VUCA, V-U-C-A. You may have come across this. And Michael, as I come to you, Olivier talked about the uncertainty and building the mental resilience for that. VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. This is the world that we're in right now. And accountants are uniquely placed to speak into that as the trusted advisor. But where do you feel that they need to improve and step up to serve their clients and put this right?
Well, I think Olivier put it spot on. We have to change the mindset of thinking or taking everything for granted. So it starts with think the unthinkable. I'm not going to enter into politics who people thought would not be elected in Europe or in other parts of the world, and then ended up being elected as prime ministers or presidents.
Thank you for not going there.
Nobody thought that this pandemic could have such an impact, and it is. in fact, we went through mental exercises in different countries. Even in Switzerland, there was an exercise in 2016 that a pandemic originating from Asia, some sort of SARS pandemic, would affect Switzerland. And the results were very clear. We need more ventilators, masks, and so on and so on. And not much happened. So it was not the complete, total unthinkable. That has happened, and we have to build up again more resilience and look at, critically look at situations. I mean, we've had an unprecedented meltdown of a listed company called Wirecard. We could fill a roundtable for 3-4 hours to talk about that. What went wrong there? Which stakeholders failed to which extent? So I think the lessons we have to learn is, yes, indeed, we're all in that together. Secondly, it is a global market we're playing in, and all our members and our organizations are in a global market. And even if you look at the Swedish model, where there was no harsh lockdown and businesses were kept open, still they were economically affected because the rest of the world was under lockdown. So we need to address this collaborative approach. And I totally agree that we as stakeholders of the profession, that means the associations, the networks, their members, but also their clients, need to address these issues with the policymakers, showing where our experience is and what should be changed for the better.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point, and I'll just throw this out to anyone just to finish this particular question. But this is a time for strong leadership, isn't it? From the government, from the policymakers, from the regulators. Some things do need to change. We need to build this resilience into the fabric of our economies and our businesses, because we can't be found wanting when something else like this happens in another 5-10 years. We must be learning from these lessons. Any final thoughts on leadership before we go into our last question?
Well, you know, it's the same old aspects with leadership that I think are particularly relevant during these times of uncertainty. I quite like the acronym VUCA. I think, you know, leadership is about facilitation and clear communication and clear clarity of idea. And I think we need to ensure that the profession, to achieve true resilience, we need to understand what the future could hold at any particular one time.
Yeah.
And I think that means that we need to have the imagination from leadership, but also then to the next tier, for the next tier down, to be able to cope with the what ifs. And as Michael said, you know, it is about what if. It's about thinking outside the box, because no one, I was looking around just my own local town the other day, and of course, everyone is out with masks on. If you had said 6 months ago, you'll be walking around your town centre and people were wearing masks, you would have thought that would have been completely cuckoo or something. Yeah. But of course, this thing happens. And so we need to have the ability through leadership to encapsulate what is next, what do we have to do. And it's that easy communication activity, which in simple terms, to be able to cope with the next stage, which is the action stage, that we need to be able to do.
Yeah, very good. Well, let's move into the final question. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I at a European level, whenever I want to listen to somebody that's visionary and also challenging, I listen to Olivier. Olivier is great on drawing out the threads of what we should be doing rather than what we are doing now. And Rhys sort of just reminded me of it a little bit by talking about what comes next. And I'm not thinking about the actions as a result of what's happening now, but the fact that the whole profession really needs to do more about climate change generally, and it can be very influential. And Olivier is one of the top people who talk about that and who are trying to promulgate that. And he started off by saying that as well in his remarks. You know, we could all be doing more within our organisations to prepare us for saving the planet. And it's, it isn't overstating the case that with the measurement and with the influence we have with policymakers, with our clients and stakeholders, we could all be doing more than we are.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, let's bring this to a close. I know, Olivier, you forbid us from mentioning the word recession, but Michael, I'm going to come to you first on this one. There is a recession. There's some kind of meltdown, economic slowdown coming. So what advice would you give to the leaders listening in the professionals sectors for coping with the rest of 2020 and even 2021, which might even be more difficult? Olivier talked about uncertainty. Accountants don't deal very well with uncertainty, and it's hard to make predictions. But what encouragement or advice would you give to the people watching and listening to help them cope with the uncertain future?
Well, I think the most essential point is to lead by example. And one small detail, here in Switzerland, some people were absolutely outraged that now you have to wear a mask if you're using public transport, but they all do. I have to say that we're very diligent in this regard. We don't see that as a political statement. It's a pure fact. But then sometimes it's important to think of others. And if you think of a medical doctor who is a surgeon and he's wearing a mask or she's wearing a mask for 4, 5, 6 hours during an operation, or if you think of a nurse who's helping people suffering from COVID-19 and that person is wearing a mask for 12 hours, aren't we very fortunate to wear it just for a short moment when we're using public transport or we go to a shop? And that goes along all those lines. It's leading by example. And I would really welcome Accountancy Europe to come up with some sort of manifesto for institutes, for networks that they can sign and say, well, this is our environmental commitment, a bit like UN Global Compact in this regard. I think there would be a strong echo, and it could be transmitted also to the individual member firms of different networks or institutes who would at least try to abide by that. And it's showing the example and saying, look, that's what we are doing. That's what our members and all the members of other networks have been doing. They have approached their clients. They have underlined that they're here to help, to address difficult moments, showing the example to say, look, we're going through difficult times too, but we are in this together. We will help you. You will help us to a certain extent, and we will get eventually out of all that.
Very good. Olivier, I'm going to come to you last and give you the final word on all of this to bring everything together in your wonderful way. But Rhys, let's come to you on this. We do have some troubling times coming up. We know that tax bills that have been deferred are going to become payable. Loans that have been taken out are going to become due. It's going to be tough for accounting firms and the clients that they serve. So any words of encouragement, advice you would give to us to help us cope with the uncertainty coming up?
Well, cash flow, cash is king. Cash flow is always going to be I think we're going to see more challenges around cash flow. I think we're going to see, but I think out of that, I think there are challenges ahead. It is fighting time. I can see that. I think though that an approach to looking for opportunity to support clients in the wider context is also how we need to react to this. Clients will be focused on one thing, which is obeying the timescales and filing, and accounting firms support that activity. But I think if there's a wider aspect to provide cash flow control or other services that can support the client beyond that, it becomes a little bit more of an integrated service rather than necessarily a one-off and move on.
Yeah, very good. Well, John, we've had the need for strong leadership from Michael and leading by example. We've had supporting clients and putting them first from Rhys there. What advice would you give to the profession for dealing with what's coming up over the next year or two?
Yeah, for me, I think that the leaders need to continue to delegate more to give themselves time to lead properly. We're still a profession where we get in a lot of the detail if we're not careful. That leadership needs to be visible. It needs to be motivational to me. There's a lot of opportunities as well as challenges, and of course, it's for us to sometimes highlight the opportunities. A favourite saying of mine with my own clients has been, hope for the best but plan for the worst. Yeah. And I think in that we will continue to assist our clients to adapt, to bounce back, to that word pivot. I'm not sure whether everybody likes that word, but to embrace technology, to understand the figures and the business models and the risks. Because for all of those things, it's possible, if you break it down, to plan your way through all things. And the last thing I say to the leaders also is, don't forget to look after yourself, because it's no good us burning ourselves out and being unavailable when our clients need us. So sometimes we always put the clients first, or our organisations first, and we don't take that evening off or that weekend off.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you'll have heard all of you as leaders, your stakeholders are not just coming to you for advice, they're coming to you as counselors and therapists. They're leaning on you emotionally, and John's absolutely right. We must be looking after our own mind and recharging our own batteries if we are going to lead strongly. So lots of things to consider here. Olivier, I'm going to give you the last word, and with some words of inspiration or encouragement for us as we look at, let's be positive and optimistic. As John said, there are some good times coming up, but it's not going to be easy, is it?
No, and I think the word of wisdom really, after hearing John, it's very difficult to provide another conclusion, because I'm decided now I'm going to look after myself a little bit.
It's all about you now, Olivier.
That was very wise.
Yes.
But no, all jokes apart, I think John is making an extremely important point in reality here. So we should all think about this as well. Rob, when I heard you, said that predictions were very difficult, I thought you would continue with the rest of the sayings. Predictions are very difficult, especially about the future. And that is also very true. And the truth that we don't want to admit is that we don't know. We pretend we know, but there are lots of things we don't know. And in these kind of situations, what is important is to understand that the willingness to go back to business as usual is nothing than a fallacy. So helping our clients means helping them change their business model, because doing business tomorrow will not be doing business yesterday, especially with more and more difficult access to resources, restrictions on energy and raw material, and the loss that we start seeing accumulating in our environment. So we have to change the way we do business. So how can we do that? Well, I think everybody has agreed that we need leadership, but we need a very specific type of leadership. We need leadership in uncharted territories. We need leadership that takes us through the unknown. And we can only do that if we go back to basics and not to detailed, sophisticated technicalities that are rooted in the world of the past. But we go back to the basics so that we can invent the future. And to do that, I think we need to be open to the dynamics of change, i.e. traveling without knowing exactly where we're going, something that most of us hate, all right?
Well, accountants tend to look back, Olivier, don't they? That's their whole life. And we need to be looking forward, 1 foot in the now and 1 foot in the next.
Exactly. But isn't that life? The present is about understanding the past to build the future. And that's exactly what we have to do today.
Yeah, very good. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, of things that you wanted to say and haven't quite got in yet? Or can we leave it on that note?
Can I say something? Just Rob,
Quickly, John,
when
yes.
we first got involved, you did a talk for an organisation I was part of all about reputation. And I think that's important at the moment for everybody to just be careful.
Exhibit
Absolutely.
1, the book, Build Your Reputation. Yes.
It's on
John,
my
thank you.
bookshelf as well, Rob, signed by you. No, I think if we do all the things we've talked about well, then our firms and us will have a great reputation, and then we've got a great future. So it all comes down to how we want to be seen in the future. You know, is our reputation important enough for us that we do everything we need to do, even though we don't know what it's going to be in the future.
Yeah, and Rhys, this is the time for accountants to step up, isn't it? Because whatever the answer for the businesses out there, whether it's insolvency and cash flow problems and pain, or whether it's opportunities and growth and innovation, the accountant must be the answer.
We agree.
Oh, Rhys, I was just pointing that to you exactly, but did you freeze there, or did you get that? Accountants are the answer, surely.
I didn't. Sorry, I think my connection was suffering at that moment.
That's quite all right. I was just saying.
I slipped on the question.
The joys of technology. This is where we find ourselves. But Michael, quickly from you. Yeah, accountants and lawyers, the professionals, they are the answer now to all the problems and all the opportunities coming up. So this is a time for them to step up, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure if they're the answer to all questions, but they're certainly a very good answer to imminent, urgent questions that are arising for clients. And they are the ones that can address complex situations, and they are the trusted advisor of the clients. I think that goes a very long way. And that relationship that has been built up has an important intrinsic value.
Well, gentlemen, this has been terrific today. Thank you so much for your contributions and your insights and your willingness to just share what's on your heart. These are interesting times, and hopefully with some resilience, by looking after ourselves and by leading strongly, we can help the profession through this and in turn help the businesses that they serve. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And I'm going to stop the recording right now.